First of all, Alexandra, why did they go to Australia?
No one has the faintest idea, and worse than that, Mark, most Australians had no idea they were even here.
Look at this. No crowds. No crowds for them at the Sydney Opera House. And if you look closely, they clearly expected crowds because you could see there the barricades were up. There were like fences up, waiting in anticipation. And there was nobody. Harry's face is like, wait, hang on, where? Where is everyone gone? Why am I not loved? Meghan probably thought the same.
They touched down in Australia like they were expecting a parade. What they got was silence. No screaming crowds at the airport, no cameras surging forward, no electric chaos, no chanting, no frenzy. Just a quiet arrival, a convoy pulling away, and two people who very deliberately skipped the traditional press moment entirely. Controlled, calculated, and telling. Because when you've spent years insisting you left royal life to escape the pressure and the performance, you don't get to also expect the adoration that came with it. And then came the moment that crystallized everything. Their first stop, the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, and the crowd gathered to receive them didn't erupt. There was no roar. What filled that room instead was something far more revealing, a soft, uncertain, almost awkward collective whisper. Hi. Not applause, not a chant, just hesitation. And if you know how to read a room, you heard exactly what that silence was saying. This is not 2018. In 2018, they were untouchable. Newly married, trailing excitement everywhere they went, radiating the kind of energy that made people flood into the streets just to catch a glimpse. When they toured Australia that year, the crowds were genuine, the obsession was real, and the monarchy felt like it had found its future. They weren't just popular, they were magnetic. People screamed their names. That was the peak. And they walked away from it. They chose to walk away from it. So the quieter rooms, the more cautious energy, the absence of that old electricity, that isn't something being done to them. That is the direct consequence of every decision they have made since. Because this trip is happening after everything. After the 2020 exit. After the Oprah interview. After the Netflix series, the memoir, the years of carefully packaged revelations, each one designed to wound the institution they claim to have loved. After all of it, and people haven't forgotten. The Australian public hasn't forgotten. The question hanging over every stop on this visit isn't welcome back. It's what exactly are you now? On paper, the itinerary looks familiar. Hospital visits, charity stops, community engagements, the surface architecture of royal work. But this is not a royal tour.
The pair start the morning off on a taxpayer-funded coastal walk in Sydney. There they are, the police around, in tow, following them around. Who's paying for that, by the way? The hard-working Aussies in the middle of a cost of living and fuel crisis.
The palace is not behind this. There is no formal duty attached to any of it. And that distinction matters, because running alongside the emotional visits and the carefully framed humanitarian moments is something else entirely. A commercial layer that no amount of curated warmth can fully obscure. While they sit with sick children and meet with vulnerable communities, they are simultaneously attending private ticketed events and paid speaking engagements. And Meghan Markle is set to headline an exclusive wellness retreat in Sydney. A multi-day experience with ticket prices reaching into the thousands. Yoga, manifestation, sound healing. A girl's weekend like no other, for a price. Let that sit for a moment. Because now, the entire framing of this trip shifts. It is no longer just about what they are doing. It is about why. The question critics are already asking out loud, and you should be asking too, is whether any of this is actually service or whether it is simply branding with a charitable backdrop. Is this about the children in that hospital room? Or is it about the image of being the kind of people who visit children in hospital rooms? Because those are not the same thing. And the more you look at how this visit has been constructed, the harder that distinction becomes to ignore. Consider even the detail of their arrival. Business class, commercial flight from Los Angeles to Melbourne, a choice that was immediately noted, immediately praised in certain corners as humble, relatable, admirably grounded. But a choice that is also, inescapably, a signal, a deliberate piece of image management designed to say something specific about who they want you to think they are. And yet within days, they are hosting events that cost thousands of dollars to attend. You cannot be the relatable commoners on the flight and the exclusive luxury brand in Sydney at the same time. That contradiction doesn't disappear just because you smile warmly enough. Inside those hospital walls, the moments were real. Children smiled. Families gathered. Meghan embraced a young patient named Patience. Harry moved through the room with ease, warm and present. For those children, it mattered, and no one is taking that from them. But outside those walls, the mood across Australia is something far more divided, far more skeptical, and for this couple, far more dangerous. The security question alone should have ended the goodwill before it began. Despite assurances that this trip is privately funded, reports have emerged suggesting that local taxpayers are absorbing certain protection costs. That's not a footnote. That's the entire argument against them in a single detail. They walked away from the crown. They rejected the institution. They cashed in on that rejection with a Netflix deal, a Spotify deal, a memoir that burned every bridge it crossed. And now the Australian public may be footing part of the bill to keep them safe while they do it. An online petition opposing that public expenditure has already gathered tens of thousands of signatures. Tens of thousands. That isn't background noise. That is organized, documented, democratic fury, and it is aimed directly at them. What makes it worse is the pattern it confirms, because this has never just been about one trip. This is about a couple who spent years insisting they wanted nothing to do with royal privilege, and then built an entire brand on the lingering glow of it. They don't get to be private citizens and quasi-royals at the same time. They don't get to denounce the institution in a primetime interview and then deploy its aesthetic whenever the cameras are rolling. But that is precisely what they keep doing. And the word that keeps surfacing in commentary, in op-eds, in the conversations happening right now across Australia is monetize. They are accused of monetizing their royal adjacency, of packaging the status they publicly rejected and selling it back to the world at a premium. Once you hear that word applied to them, you cannot unhear it. Because suddenly, every appearance reframes itself. Every hospital visit, every carefully lit photograph, every soft moment with a sick child starts to carry a second question underneath it. Who does this serve? That question followed them straight from the hospital to their next stop, a women's refuge in Melbourne, supporting victims of domestic violence and homelessness. And look, the cause is not in question. The women in that shelter needed support long before Meghan Markle arrived, and they will need it long after she leaves. But what unfolded inside that refuge produced one of the most revealing contradictions of the entire tour. Meghan put on an apron. She stepped into the kitchen. She smiled, she cooked, she moved through the space, projecting warmth and solidarity, serving meals to some of the most vulnerable women in Australia. The imagery was deliberate. The message was clear. She wanted you to see a woman of means choosing to stand shoulder to shoulder with women who have nothing. That is a powerful visual. It is also a performance, and the costuming gave it away immediately. Because Meghan Markle served food in a domestic violence shelter wearing a designer outfit valued at over $1,000. Let that land, $1,000, in a kitchen, in a refuge, surrounded by women who in many cases fled their homes with nothing but the clothes on their backs. The dissonance is not subtle. It is not accidental. It is the entire story of this couple compressed into a single image, the language of empathy wrapped around the instincts of a brand. You do not wear a $1,000 outfit to a women's shelter because you forgot to change. You wear it because some part of the calculation, conscious or not, never stops thinking about the photograph, never stops thinking about the story being told. And that is what Australia is being asked to absorb right now. Not the compassion, but the contradiction sitting directly underneath it. The gap between the message and the reality is no longer something you have to look for. It is standing in a shelter kitchen in designer clothing, smiling for the cameras, and calling it service. Let that land for a moment. The women's shelter is not the point of the trip. It is the setup. And while that image is being constructed, while those photographs are being distributed, while the carefully selected moments of warmth and relatability are circulating across every platform, just a few kilometers away, people are paying thousands of dollars for yoga sessions, for guided manifestation, for sound healing, and for the single most expensive thing on that retreat's menu, proximity to her brand. Not proximity to a queen, not proximity to an elected official, proximity to a brand. That is what is being sold. That is what thousands of dollars buys you. Access to the constructed version of Meghan Markle, refined and packaged and priced accordingly. And Harry is not standing outside this. He is embedded in it. His keynote on workplace well-being at a high-level mental health summit is not a free public address. It is a ticketed, tiered, commercially structured event. Different prices, different levels of access, different proximity to the man himself. He is not here as a prince. He is not here as a public servant. He is here as a product, and the product comes in multiple price points. The question that is now being asked, openly by commentators, by analysts, by royal experts who have spent years observing this couple, is whether any of this is actually separable from what they walked away from. Because they did not walk away from royal life and build something entirely new. They walked away from royal life and monetized the door they used to exit. The titles they surrendered are gone. The access those titles represent is still being traded. The connection to the monarchy, the history, the mystique, the weight of that association still opens every room they walk into. And they know it. They have always known it. That is precisely why the rooms keep getting booked. More than 45,000 Australians have now signed a petition opposing the use of public funds for their security arrangements. 45,000 signatures, not a fringe response, not a handful of keyboard complaints buried in comment sections. A documented, organized, growing expression of public frustration from the very country they chose as the stage for this chapter of their reinvention. And those signatures carry a very specific message, that people can see the shape of what is happening here. That privately funded does not resolve every question when local authorities are still being mobilized, when public infrastructure is still being deployed, when the cost of protecting a commercial tour is still being absorbed by people who never bought a ticket and never will. The backlash is not irrational, it is precise. It is the natural conclusion of watching two people claim independence while continuing to draw on the very currency they claimed to renounce. Because that is the contradiction that sits at the center of everything playing out in Australia right now. Not the gap between wealth and service. We have all watched wealthy people do charitable work without this response. The contradiction is the claim. The specific, repeated, loudly stated claim that they left to escape the institution, to live authentically, to serve without agenda, to exist outside the machinery of royalty and celebrity and commercial performance. That claim is what turns every retreat ticket into an indictment. That claim is what makes every staged shelter photograph feel like a transaction. That claim is what 45,000 people are pushing back against when they put their name to that petition. They did not leave the game. They restructured their deal and kept playing, and Australia is watching with open eyes, city to city, event to event, asking the one question that no amount of careful choreography has managed to answer. Not where they are, not what they're doing, but why? And more specifically, who, exactly, is all of this actually for? That distinction matters enormously, because one of those things is service, and the other is strategy. And when you can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins, you have your answer. The critics didn't arrive at this conclusion slowly. The language around this tour has been sharp from the beginning, and it has only sharpened further. The phrase quasi-royal tour didn't appear by accident. It crystallized something that a lot of people had been feeling but hadn't yet found the words for. Because that is exactly what this is. A tour that borrows the visual grammar of a royal visit. The hospital rooms, the community spaces, the therapeutic gardens, the carefully staged moments of human connection, while simultaneously operating as a revenue-generating machine for a private brand. They are using the aesthetic of royalty to sell access to themselves, and they don't see anything wrong with that. Or if they do, they have made the calculation that the returns justify the exposure. Every moment on this tour gets reframed through that lens and cannot be unframed. A hospital visit is no longer just a hospital visit. A charity appearance is no longer just charity. Even a walk through a crowd, even silence, even eye contact, even the simple act of showing up becomes part of the construction. That is the environment they have created for themselves, not one that was imposed on them. One they built, choice by choice, decision by decision, starting the moment they sat down for that Oprah interview and decided the whole world needed to hear their version. And here is what makes the silence in Australia so devastating. Because in 2018, Australia wasn't silent. In 2018, when they were newly married and still working royals and still seen as something electric and new, Australia met them with a kind of energy that felt almost historic. The crowds were massive. The reception was overwhelming. The goodwill was real. Now the energy is measured, controlled, in some moments almost reluctant. The enthusiasm that once felt unstoppable has been replaced by something closer to scrutiny. And that shift didn't happen to them. They caused it. Every calculated move since 2020, every media ambush, every book chapter, every Netflix camera, every carefully placed accusation, it all compounded. And Australia is where that compound interest is being collected. So what does it mean for the identity they're still trying to build? Because they are still building it. That much is undeniable. Every engagement on this tour is a brick in the wall. Every location chosen, every speech delivered, every headline generated, it all feeds the larger construction, a version of themselves that exists outside the monarchy, untethered from the institution, self-defined and self-directed. Except it isn't. Because they cannot stop referencing the framework they claim to have left. The language around them never fully releases from the royal context, and neither do they. They need the monarchy to be the villain that justified their exit. They need the title to legitimize the platform. They need the institution they abandoned to keep giving them meaning. That is not independence. That is dependency dressed up as liberation. And the audience watching this tour, city by city, event by event, is beginning to see the costume for exactly what it is. So they keep performing the contradiction. They stand in front of crowds that were drawn by the very institution they publicly dismantled, delivering speeches that borrow the moral authority of a family they accused of racism on international television. Every handshake is borrowed prestige. Every applause line is cashing a check from an account they tried to close. The audience in those rooms may not say it out loud, but the cameras catch the hesitation, the brief pauses, the polite smiles that do not quite reach the eyes. The narrative is no longer entirely theirs to manage, and they know it. And then there is the money, the part of this story that never goes away no matter how many times they redirect the conversation. The trip is privately funded. We are told this clearly, repeatedly, as if the repetition itself is supposed to settle the matter. It does not. Because when public safety resources are in play, the question of who is actually paying becomes the only question that matters. Tens of thousands of signatures on a petition are not a fringe reaction. That is an organized, documented, growing refusal to accept the arrangement on their terms. That number represents something the couple cannot spin, cannot reframe, and cannot survive with a tearful interview. It represents the public drawing a line. And the line is this: you do not get to walk away from public duty and then return expecting public infrastructure to follow you like a loyal servant. Every appearance they make now exists inside that contradiction. Applause on one side, contempt on the other, and a reckoning that inches closer with every city on the itinerary. They engineered this moment. They scripted the exit, staged the victimhood, monetized the grievance, and then flew back expecting a welcome they had already forfeited. The architecture of their own downfall is not a mystery. It is a blueprint, written in their own hand, signed with their own names, and now being read aloud by the very world they tried to conquer. If you've been watching this story unfold and you knew from the beginning how it would end, you belong here. Palace Leaks covers what the mainstream press is too polite to say plainly. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story is far from over, and every new chapter proves the point.